Friends, welcome to ePathshala in Linguistics. We are discussing the topic language universals and language typology. Under that, the unit that we are going to discuss today is Indo Aryan languages. So first, we will discuss the word order universals that are found in Indo Aryan languages. Then we take up India as a linguistic area. What is the evidence we can provide in support of the notion India as a linguistic area? What is the parametric variation that is found in Indo Aryan languages? Then we will go to some specific features of Indo Aryan languages. Indo Aryan has the largest number of speakers in India. All the Indo Aryan languages are verb final. Some of the Indo Aryan languages such as Hindi, Urdu, Kashmiri, Punjabi, Marathi and Konkani are ergative absolutive. Some languages such as Bangla, Odia, Assamese and Nepali are nominative accusative. I am sure you would know the difference between ergative absolutive and nominative accusative, so I am not going to go into the details of that. So what are the word order universals that are found in Indo Aryan languages? You know that all Indo Aryan languages are verb final. So the word order that is exhibited is S-O-V. Let us take sentence number 1. Ram Sita se mandir mein mila. Ram is the subject. Sita se is the object. Mandir mein is the locative phrase. Mila, met is the verb. So this sentence has subject, object, verb order, and the verb occurs in the final position. However, just as in Dutch and German, Kashmiri also exhibits what we call the V2 position. The verb occurs in the V2 position. Therefore, Kashmiri is called a V2 language. So these sentences are exclusively demarcated for finite form of the verb. In such cases, the auxiliary verb may precede the main verb as in to, or the lone verb may occur in the second position as in 3. Such occurrence is generally labeled as the V2 phenomenon. So the Kashmiri sentence is Ram Chu Shamas Kitab Diwan. Chu is the auxiliary verb, which is finite. So it occurs to the right of the subject, which is called the V2 position. Actually, the verb is Diwan Chu, but Chu from the end moves to the right of the subject. That's why it is called V2. Then let's take another sentence. Ram gave Sham a book. In Hindi, you would say Ram ne Sham ko kitab di. Di occurs in the final position. But in Kashmiri, Raman dits Shamas kitab. That is Ram dits gave occurs in the V2 position. Note that in 2, the auxiliary verb chu carries the present tense marker. In 3, the verb dits give past, it carries the past tense marker, and they are both finite forms of the verb. Hence, they occur in the second position of the sentence. The verb in sentence number 2 cannot occur, the chu cannot occur in the final position, as sentence number 4 will tell you. Raman Shamas Kitab Diwan Chu is ungrammatical. Similarly, as sentence number 5 will show you, the verb dits cannot occur in the final position to reflect SOV word order, that is subject object verb order, as you have Raman Shamas Kitab dits is ungrammatical. Then next, we consider is word order. As you all know, word order in Indian languages is relatively free. So is the case in Indo Aryan languages. I am not going to discuss these things. You can see the general South Asian languages chapter and see the examples there. Now, what are the word order universals that are found in these languages? You have all Indo Aryan languages having postpositions. That is, the noun is followed by a postposition, not as a preposition like in English, French, or Khasi. Khasi is spoken in Meghalaya. Let's take a sentence such as 9 from Bengali or Bangla, Ghorer Bhitore. Here, room is ghor, is the genitive, it's a postposition. So the genitive follows the noun ghor, and Bhitore, a also is a kind of postposition. So that follows the phrase inside Bhitor. Assamese, take an example like Dan Gita, Gitat Koi. Koi is Dan. Dan follows the noun Gita. Now recall that in the government and binding, tense, verbs, infill, verbs and adpositions, that is postpositions and prepositions, are treated as heads and are case assigners. The direction in which the head assigns structural case in the government and binding framework to its complement in verb final languages is from right to left. This is labeled as the head direction parameter. In non-verb final languages, it is from right to left. In all Indo Aryan languages, since the complement invariably precedes the head, the direction of case assignment is from right to left. The verb assigns accusative case to its complement, and the postposition also assigns accusative case to its complement from right to left, as in 9 and 10 we have seen above. The auxiliary verb in all verb final languages follows the main verb, as in 11, बच्चे घर जा रहे होंगे. From Hindi Urdu, the children might be going home. Ja is the main verb, rahe honge is the auxiliary verb, rahe is the progressive, honge might is a modal. So bacche ghar ja rahe honge, the main verb is followed by the auxiliary verb. The next universal we are going to consider is the order of indirect object and direct object. The indirect object precedes the direct object in the unmarked word order. Let's take a sentence from Bangla, as in sentence number 12. Ram Sita ke ekta boi diyeche. Ram to Sita one book gave. Sita is the recipient, hence Sita is the indirect object. So indirect object occurs first, then ekta boi is the direct object, therefore it comes to the right. So thus the order is indirect object preceding the direct object. In all Indo Aryan languages, the genitive precedes the governing noun. For example, Ghorer Darwaja, room, genitive, door in Bangla. Note that Dorja, door, can occur on its own, whereas Ghorer cannot occur unless the room is there. Hence, Dorja, door is the governing noun or head, and the genitive precedes the governing noun. In 13, Ghorer Dorja, the door of the house. Time adverbs precede place adverbs. Let T stand for time and P stand for place. Hence the order is TP, time and place, as opposed to PT in non-verb final languages. Let's take a Hindi example again. प्रतीक 10 बजे घर पहुंचा. The time adverb is 10 बजे. घर is the place adverb. Therefore, time adverb precedes the place adverb. Whereas in English, as you can see, Pratik reached home at 10 o'clock. Home is the place adverb. At 10 o'clock is the time adverb. The order is PT. Another interesting feature is the order of time and place adverbials. Time and place adverbials occur in descending order in verb final languages, and they occur in the ascending order in non-verb final languages. What do we mean by descending order? By descending order, we mean the superordinate chunk of place or time, the bigger chunk of place or time occurs first, then a subordinate chunk, then a chunk subordinate to that occurs. So you can see as an example 15, 2010 में 2010 में जनवरी महीने की 15 तारीख की रात को 8 बजे. 2010 is a year, it's a bigger chunk of time. January is a month, it is a less bigger or smaller chunk of time in comparison to the year. 15 तारीख is a particular day, so less than a month, day is smaller than the month. Raat, night, is again a smaller chunk of the day. 8 baje is still a smaller chunk of the night. Therefore, what you can see from year to the month to the day and to the particular time of the day, that is how you have the descending order. In English, look at this. At 8 o'clock at night on the 15th of January in the year 2010, that is, at 8 o'clock is a smaller chunk of time, night is a bigger chunk of time, 15th is another bigger chunk, and the 15th January is the month, again the biggest chunk is 2010. In Bangla too, let's take an example of descending order of place adverbials in Bangla. Tirupati te Thakurer Mondirer Shodar Dorjar Shi Gulote. At the steps of the main door of God's temple in Tirupati. Tirupati is a bigger place. Thakurer Mandir is a smaller place. Main door, Shodor Darja, is much smaller place. Shi, step, is a much smaller place. Gulo is a classifier. So you have a bigger chunk of place, then a smaller chunk, then much smaller chunk, and the smallest. That is the descending order. What happens in English? At the steps of the main door of God's temple in Tirupati. Steps, smaller chunk. Main door, bigger chunk. God's temple, much bigger. Tirupati is the biggest place in the order. Let us move on to the comparative and superlative constructions. The marker of comparison in English is than. So, in a sentence such as 17, Sita is more beautiful than Gita. Than is the comparative marker. The standard of comparison is Gita. That is, you are comparing Sita with Gita. So, as one would expect, since English has prepositions, than, which itself is a preposition, precedes Gita. Since Hindi and other Indo Aryan languages have postpositions, so what would you expect? You would expect the comparative marker, since it is a post position, to follow the standard of comparison. Yes, your guess comes true in 17. Hita gitat koi dunya dunya. Hita gitat koi dunya dunya. So koi is than, Gita is the standard of comparison. So koi follows the standard of comparison. There is an adjectival comparison marker in English, and in some developmental languages. However, this kind of marker is not found either in Indo Aryan languages or in Dravidian languages. We now move on to evidence in support of the notion of India as a linguistic area. In this section, we try to provide what is the evidence that can be adduced from Indo Aryan languages in support of the notion India as a linguistic area. The evidence that we are going to provide includes compound verbs, conjunct verbs, reduplication, echo words, conjunctive participles, and the quotative as a complementizer in some Indo Aryan languages. What is a compound verb? Compound verbs are verb 1, verb 2 combination. Verb 1 is the main verb, or it's called also the polar verb. Verb 2 is the vector verb. It's a kind of subordinate verb which adds a shade of aspectual meaning to the main verb. The vector verb or the compound verb contributes to the meaning in terms of perfectivity, according to Peter Hook, 1991, directionality toward or away from the speaker, suddenness, according to Masika, 1974, inception or completion, according to Butt, 1995, or the attitude of the speaker towards the event. In Hindi, Urdu, and Punjabi, the polar verb, that is the main verb, is always in its stem form. You know the difference between an infinitive and a stem. For example, in Hindi, karna is the infinitive, kar is the stem. While in Indo Aryan languages such as Assamese, Bangla, Kashmiri, Marathi, and Odia, the polar verb is in its conjunctive participle form. It's like in Dravidian. And the vector verb V2 carries the tense, aspect, and agreement markers. Let us look at some examples. Sentence number 18 from Hindi Urdu. बच्चे खाना खा लेते हैं. I repeat sentence number 18. Let's look at sentence number 18. बच्चे खाना खा लेते हैं. The children can eat. So, can eat food. Here, kha is the main verb. Lena literally means take, but it does not have the literal meaning. So, it gives an aspectual meaning, that is, it gives the meaning of capability. बच्चे खाना खा लेते हैं. Le is the vector verb. It is the vector verb that takes the imperfect aspect marker te. Hain is the present tense marker. So you have the vector verb, the main verb, polar verb in its infinitival form, in its stem form, and le is the vector verb, and it takes the auxiliary verb to its right. In some Indo Aryan languages such as Bangla, Assamese, Odia, Marathi, Kashmiri, and Konkani, the verb stem is in the conjunctive participle form in the formation of a compound verb. Recall that in Hindi, Punjabi, the verb stem is always in the stem form. Here you have the verb stem in its conjunctive participle form. So what happens is, the conjunctive participle form and the vector verb may be interpreted together as one verb and as one unit, or it can be interpreted as the conjunctive participle as a subordinate verb and the vector verb as the main verb. So it can be interpreted in terms of two events. Let's take an example and see. Sentence number 19, ছবিগুলো দেখে নাও. Here, dekh is the main verb. Now is to take. If I were to translate this into dekh lo, because in Hindi, my verb is in the stem form. But in Bangla, it is in the conjunctive participle form. Dekh A. A is the conjunctive participle marker, which we have indicated in sentence number 19 as CPM. So let us take first the compound verb reading. Dekhe now means look at the picture and complete the process of looking, one unit. Like in Hindi, dekh lo. But dekhe now can be interpreted as two events. That is, dekhe is dekhkar of Hindi, now is lo. So it can be interpreted as dekhkar lo. That means look carefully first at the pictures before you take them. That is, dekhe is one event, now is another event. So this kind of ambiguity occurs because your main verb is in the conjunctive participle form. The same type of ambiguity as you will see in Dravidian languages also, because in Dravidian languages also, when the vector verb occurs, the polar verb or the main verb is in its conjunctive participle form. Then we move on to the next one. These are called conjunct verbs. What are conjunct verbs? Conjunct verbs are noun plus verb sequence. This is also a feature of India as a linguistic area. So, when the conjunct verb occurs, what you have is the patient of the conjunct verb takes a dative case marker, while in Hindi, the patient takes a genitive case marker. As you can see in sentence number 20. मैंने राम की मदद की. I is the subject, ergative case mark, because the verb is transitive. Ram ki madad. Ram is the one who is being helped. I helped Ram. Ram is the object. But Ram, instead of taking accusative case, Ram takes the genitive. Ram ki madad. That is, Ram ki functions as a genitival phrase of madad. So, मैंने Ram ki madad ki. Ram ki madad becomes the direct object. Therefore, the verb ki, madad is feminine. Therefore, you have Ram ki madad ki. I helped Ram. In Bangla, the indirect object takes the dative case marker, just as in Dravidian. In Dravidian too, it takes a dative case marker. Ami Ram ke shohajjo kore diyechi. I Ram ke, to Ram, shohajjo, help, kore diyechi. मैंने राम की सहायता की. Here in Bangla sentence, if I translate that into Hindi, it will be मैंने राम को सहायता की. The next one we will consider is flexible word order. All Indo Aryan languages, just as in all South Asian languages, exhibit relatively free word order. Hence, the constituents in a sentence may be moved freely or they can be scrambled. Such movement may bring a particular constituent into a focus, We are not going to discuss that now. Another dominant feature of Indian languages is, South Asian languages, is reduplication. Any constituent such as a noun, a pronoun, adjective, adverb, participle can be reduplicated. When nouns are reduplicated, the sentence may get a distributive interpretation. The next one that is a characteristic feature of Indian languages is echo words. Echo words in many South Asian languages impart the interpretation of and the like. For example, chai vai, chai and the like, khana vana, food and the like in Hindi. Echo words may play some role in politeness, in terms of politeness. We are not going to discuss that. You can look at the unit and read it. The next one we are going to consider is the conjunctive participles, which are typical of South Asian languages. Just as in other South Asian languages, Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, and all Assamese, Bangla, they all have a conjunctive participle. The conjunctive participle in Hindi, Urdu, or Punjabi, the conjunctive participle marker is a free form. Kha, eat, khakar, having eaten. The kar is a free form. It's a free morpheme. Khake, the K is a free form. Whereas in Bangla, Assamese, Marathi, Konkani, the verb stem is in the perfect participle form, and the conjunctive marker, CPM, is a bound form. For example, take 22, bacche. Okay, this 22 is a reduplicated form. I'll just explain that to you in a minute. In 22, the conjunctive participle is reduplicated or repeated. When repeated, it's only the stem that is repeated and not the conjunctive participle marker in Hindi, Urdu. Why? Because the kar is a free form, so kar cannot be repeated. And you have in 21, bacche khel kar thak gaye. Khel kar means having played. Khel kar means having played a lot. But you cannot have khel kar. Why you cannot have? Kar is a free form. Whenever you have the conjunctive participle marker, a free form, the first one does not overtly occur. So you have khel kar and not khel kar. Let's take an example from Bangla, where the conjunctive participle marker is a bound form, like in Dravidian. The Bangla form is A. Chelera, khele, kalanto, hoiga che. Khele, having played. When it is repeated, it is khele. Why? Because A is a conjunctive participle marker, so which is bound form, which is a bound marker. Therefore, khele you should have and not khel. This is a pan-Indian feature. It applies to Dravidian also. I give you an example from Dravidian, Telugu. Pillalu aadi alisipoyaru. Pillalu, children. Aad is the verb to play. Aadi, having played. That E is the conjunctive participle marker, and it's a bound form. Therefore, as one would expect, it is aadi, not aadi. Why? Whenever you have bound form, just as in Bangla, Konkani, Marathi, Assamese, Odia, you have to have the conjunctive participle marker occurring twice in a reduplicated form. Another important feature that you find in South Asian languages is the quotative. And not all Indo Aryan languages have the quotative. Quotative, what is quotative? Quotative is a participial form of the verb, say, in Indo Aryan languages and in all South Asian languages. And it performs the function of the complementizer. This quotative performs not only the function of a complementizer, it functions like a reason marker, it functions like a purpose marker, it is used in naming and labeling, etc. As a complementizer, the quotative invariably occurs to the right of the embedded clause in Marathi, Gujarati, Konkani, Nepali, Assamese, Bangla, Odia, etc. Such occurrence of the quotative to the right as a complementizer is consistent in terms of the unmarked sentence structure of verb final languages. Hindi, Urdu, Punjabi, Kashmiri do not have the quotative. Instead, they have a complementizer that occurs to the left of the embedded clause, and such occurrence is inconsistent. I repeat the word inconsistent with the verb final nature of these languages. Let's take the Hindi Urdu example. In 24, बच्चों ने सोचा कि आज हम खूब खेलेंगे. Ki is the complementizer that links the main clause and the subordinate clause. The subordinate clause, आज हम खूब खेलेंगे, we will play a lot today, we will play well today, and the complementizer key occurs to the left of the embedded clause. So, बच्चों ने सोचा कि S2. Whereas, so this is what we call the initial complementizer, key. Whereas in Gujarati, Assamese, Odia, Bangla, you have the quotative occurring to the right. Let's take the quotative in Gujarati. Teno bhai paas thayo emte bolyo. Let me repeat. The quotative in Gujarati, I am repeating. The quotative in Gujarati, Teno bhai paas thayo emte bolyo. He said that his younger brother passed. So the M is a final complementizer. It occurs to the right of the embedded clause. Let's take, what does a language such as Dakkini? Dakkini is a contact language in the south, and it is an Indo Aryan language, but it has acquired a number of features of Dravidian languages. As a result, since Dravidian languages have the quotative that occurs to the right of the embedded clause, and the quotative has the meaning in Dravidian languages, having said, say plus the conjunctive participle marker. So what happens in Dravidian? They have calqued it. Having said is translated into Dravidian, into Dakkini as bol ke. So let's take a sentence such as 25. Tell him to go. That means tell him that he goes. So you have a sentence, Usku chale jao, bol ke bol dio. That is, ask him to go, and bol ke is the complementizer, is the linker that links the main clause and the subordinate clause. Bol ke is the complementizer that links the main clause and the subordinate clause, and it occurs to the right of the embedded clause, Usku chale jao, to the right of S2. The quotative has number of functions. I am going to discuss some of the functions here. The quotative occurs as an identifier. This is found in Sanskrit also. It is used in naming and labeling. For example, as in sentence number 27 from Marathi, In that town, I met a boy named Vijay. Vijay is the name of the boy, a boy named Vijay. So since the quotative comes from the verb to say, Marathi uses the verb man, and un is the conjunctive participle marker. You have in 27, त्या गावात विजय म्हणून or विजय असा एक मुलगा मला भेटला. That town in, that is in that town, Vijay म्हणून. म्हणून in English, see, a boy named Vijay. Named occurs to the left of the noun Vijay. But as one would expect, the complement, the quotative occurs to the right. So Vijay म्हणून असा एक मुलगा मला भेटला. In that town, I met a boy named Vijay. We shall now discuss parametric variation that is found in Indo Aryan languages. Languages differ from each other in terms of a specific number of or a limited number of parameters. Some of those parameters include pro-drop, free word order, etc. So let's discuss one by one. Pro-drop. In all South Asian languages and also in Indo Aryan languages, the subject or the direct object or the indirect object or an oblique object can be pro-dropped. So you can have something like, did the children finish all the work? In Hindi I can say only with the verb kar diya, finished. That's why in Indian English, when somebody asks you the question, have you seen that movie? The expected answer should be, yes, I saw it. But since we pro-drop the object, in Indian English, often you hear, yes, I saw. Free word order. In Indian languages, the word order is free. So is the case in Indo Aryan languages also. I am not going to give the details. Next important point I want to discuss is the superiority effects. English observes superiority effects. What do we mean by that? When two WH phrases compete for movement to a given site, it is the superior or higher WH phrase that moves to the front. That is, if you have, let us say, the question word movement to the left in English, and if you are questioning the subject and the direct object and the indirect object, let us say, then it is the subject that is stronger or superior or higher in the hierarchy. Therefore, it is the subject that comes first in the question and later the other constituents come. Hindi or any other Indo Aryan language, for that matter, or any South Asian language, does not observe any superiority effects. Let us take a Hindi example. The example is, I do not know whom, when, why, how, what, who will give not. I don't know. The English translation will be idiomatic translation. I do not know who will give what to whom and when and why. Okay. In English, I do not know who will give. The who comes in the initial position of the embedded clause. But in Hindi, you can have kisko, the indirect object, kab, the time adverb, oblique object, kyun, why, the reason adverb, oblique object, kaise, how, the manner adverb, kya, what, the direct object, kaun, who. It comes at the end. Of course, in English, in Hindi, you can say kaun, kisko, but this is also possible. So what does that prove? This proves that Hindi or for that matter any Indo Aryan language, does not obey any superiority effects because there is no obligatory question word movement in Hindi or in any other Indian language as it does in English. So the correct idiomatic translation or the correct translation of the sentence is, I do not know who will give what to whom, when and why and how. You cannot say in Hindi, I do not know whom will give what, who, etc. Absence of tense and person harmony. Indian languages, you can have your main clause in the past tense, the embedded verb in its future form, as you can see in sentence number 37. All Indo-Aryan languages do not have the expletive expressions like the weather expressions. It is raining, it is cold, or there is a book there on the table. Either the it or the there can occur in any Indian language, including Khasi, which is a verb medial language. So, for example, in a sentence like 39, Srinagar mein barish ho rahi hai, it is raining in Srinagar. There is no translation for the it in any Indian language that we know of. So, some specific features. Indo-Aryan languages have relative clauses. There are three types of relative clauses: right adjoint clauses, relative correlative clauses, and VP adjoint clauses. You can see those examples from your handout or from your text. For example, in 42 you have pujar. You can also have the participles modifying the head, as in sentence number 42 from Bengali, pujar lekha boita bhalo. The book which Puja wrote is good. What can be modified? What cannot be modified in a participle relative? You can see it from the handout, from your text. Another feature of Indo-Aryan languages is the nominative subject construction, where the subject can be marked by a case other than the nominative case marker. It could be genitive case marked, it could be locative case marked, it could be dative case marked, or it could be accusative case marked, etc. You can see that in your text. The next point is clefs. In clefs, you bring something to focus. The focused element can be either to the left or to the right. In Sinhala, Dravidian languages, all Dravidian languages have the cleft constructions. No other Indo-Aryan language other than Sinhala, which itself is an Indo-Aryan language, has clefts, which Sinhala has borrowed from Tamil. Sentence number 46 is an example. It was that man who gave Gunapala the money yesterday. Ye Gunapala ta salli tunne ye minha. It was that man. So the man is in focus. It is the man that is clefted. So in Dravidian as well as in Sinhala, the clefted element occurs as the rightmost constituent. A minha is the one that is clefted, therefore that occurs to the right. Indo-Aryan languages have only nominal anaphors. They don't have any verbal anaphors. I am not going to go into the details now. You can look into your text. Long distance binding is permitted when the nominal anaphor is a simplex form, and it is not permitted when the nominal anaphor is a complex form. You can look up in the section of anaphora for this. Okay, let me summarize what we have done in this. In this chapter, we have discussed word order universals, evidence in support of the notion of India as a linguistic area, parametric variation found in Indo Aryan languages, and some specific features of Indo Aryan languages. Thank you. Thank you.